You know, back in 2008, the most hyped Sonic game was Sonic Unleashed, but there were also plenty of other games out at the same time. But what was especially interesting was that during the hype cycle of Sonic Unleashed, there was an entirely different Sonic game on the side of Sega's website, Sonic and the Black Knight, the sequel to Sonic and the Secret Rings. Obviously being exclusive to the Nintendo Wii like its predecessor. Can't say if this was anyone else's experience, but for me it was just like, oh man, Unleashed is gonna be awesome, and I guess there's this new game coming out next year too. That new game came out on March 3rd of 2009. With this game, I think it's pretty clear they wanted to do more of these fantasy adventures with Sonic because it was labeled as part of the Storybook series. When I was a kid, I called them the Sonic and the series. Guess the Storybook series sounds better. This story places Sonic in Camelot in the midst of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table story. I feel like there are a lot of different directions this storybook concept could go, like a Wild West game or a Greek mythology game. The concept just lends itself really well to creative level ideas. I think it was clear they wanted to do more of these, but they just never did. If you saw the title of the video, you might be surprised. Because in my opinion, the review I did on Secret Rings was pretty scathing. This led to a lot of comments talking about how they actually liked the storybook games. I thought this was interesting because that video said nothing about Sonic and the Black Knight, it was only about Secret Rings. But I suppose it's easy to think the two are tightly connected. They are obviously both storybook games with the back of the boxes being symmetrical, and while I agree with all that, the only thing I could say about Secret Rings and Black Knight as a pair is that they're very much opposed. Because both start with great theming and ideas, but one of these games is terrible and the other one is pretty fucking good. I mean, just compare how Black Knight opens to how Secret Rings opens. That game gave us an introduction to the storybook-styled cutscenes and then dumped the player into the Lost Prologue, several mind-numbing tutorial stages. In Black Knight, boom, CG cutscene. Now, the opening of Unleashed totally overshadows this one, but I still fucking love this scene. Sonic gets summoned to this world with nothing but 2 chili dogs on hand, which is a detail I loved when I first played this game back in 2009, because at that point I had caught up on Sonic Sat AM and many episodes of Sonic Underground, and in those American shows, it was a thing that Sonic just loved chili dogs, and starting in Sonic Unleashed, this became part of the games too. I think Black Knight's one of the coolest depictions of Sonic in the series' history, and a scene like this starts off on a great note.
Oh, I get it. No problem. I'm used to stuff like this.
As for the context, this wizard, Merlina, is being chased by King Arthur, and that's when she summons Sonic. They escape the king, and Sonic gets told that he's immortal thanks to his sword and his scabbard, and that he's bringing demons from the underworld into the kingdom. To stand a chance against him, Sonic has to find the sacred sword, Caliburn, and defeat the Knights of the Round Table, Lancelot, Gawain, and Percival. Starting us off in the tutorial stage, Misty Lake. Here, it's just a lot better done than in the previous one. One stage on movement, another on basic sword usage, a boss fight with King Arthur after you meet Caliburn, and then another stage with more specific sword tactics, and with that, the game begins. The world of King Arthur houses many areas that are visually distinct from where we usually see Sonic, like Camelot Castle, Molten Mine, and the Dragon's Lair. The locales in Black Knight are not as creative as those from Secret Rings, though, because while everything looks medieval in Deep Woods, Titanic Plains, and Misty Lake, they aren't too out of the ordinary when it comes to Sonic. Not like Secret Rings, where we got stages like Dinosaur Jungle or Levitated Ruin. But locales are merely visual, especially in these games because the gameplay in Black Knight is still on rails like Secret Rings was. But on the note of visuals, I think the graphics are pretty much on par with Secret Rings when it comes to the in-game stuff. The overall presentation of Black Knight is far superior, like this world map we get, as opposed to the level select of Secret Rings. The animated cutscenes are more colorful and show movement in ways that the ones from the last game never did, and there are far more CG cutscenes, and they also have a far more action-oriented direction than the ones that were in the last game. But back to the gameplay, the objective of every stage in this game is to get Sonic from one side of the screen to another by dodging obstacles and defeating enemies. But ultimately, the path you go on is predetermined by the game and you can't really do anything to break the script. However, this game handles so much better than Secret Rings does. In that game, Sonic would automatically move forward, and it was up to the player to use the Wii Remote to navigate him from left to right. The problem came from Sonic just not handling that well and the game just not being very responsive to your inputs. In Black Knight, Sonic does not move by himself, he will instead play this game with both the Wii Remote and the nunchuck, as the analog stick is what moves Sonic forward, backwards, and left to right, with the A button jumping, homing, attacking, and jump canceling. This change alone allows Black Knight to feel much better to play than Secret Rings ever could. You're in control of the game's pace, and I think that's a lot more palatable. Also helps that the backflip move is far more useful in getting away from enemies than it was in Secret Rings. Black Knight is just a more focused gameplay system, one that does not need to pull tricks like kneecapping Sonic to include some idea of player growth. In that game, basic things like smooth and responsive ground controls were unlockable abilities Sonic had, which only made a game with undercooked motion controls even worse. In Black Knight, you get ranked from 1 to 5 stars at the end of every stage, and the better you perform, the higher your follower count will be, as people in the world of the game will hear of your skills, and the higher your follower gauge, the easier it will be to level up and increase your proficiency. Doing that unlocks bonuses like a burst of speed upon landing, which actually was an ability in the last game, but in this game we could just cut past the part where you unlock better controls and all that. The proficiency system actually gives the player a mechanics-based reason to want to perform well on stages by not taking damage and getting more hit combos because it allows you to get stronger as a character while you do so as a player. It's a good way to go about designing a ranking system. So what Black Knight was built around was obviously that Sonic now has a sword. I feel like that alone gets held over this game's head like it's a flaw. I mean, to compare it to Shadow the Hedgehog, guns were meant to give that game a more mature look. It failed, but here, a sword really doesn't have that same energy in my opinion. Sonic's whole thing is spinning in a ball, and I feel like having a sword on the end of that is a really interesting one-game gimmick, suited really well for this Arthurian adventure. Of course, this avoids the question of how it actually plays. Like I said, you control this game with the Wii Remote and the Nunchuck, the sword combat being tied to shaking the Wii Remote. This also being a world before the Wii Motion Plus, which allowed for more accurate tracking and swordplay gameplay as a result. In Black Knight, it's much like Twilight Princess, where the difference between pressing a button and shaking the remote just amounts to how your wrists are going to feel afterwards. Needless to say, if the game was trying to get you to feel like you actually had a sword in your hand, that was a total failure. But at that, the sword combat feels wrong on the ground because the swings are really slow and delayed, even when playing on Dolphin with the buttons replacing the functionality of the remote. The swings you do on the move feel better, but ultimately still feel like it's slowing you down when doing it. I just brought up Dolphin, so I might as well make it clear that, like Secret Rings, I did a full playthrough on an actual Wii with this mess of a setup, but then did a playthrough on Dolphin with HD and 60 FPS if the footage didn't make that clear. Buttons didn't make the game any better or worse though, which sounds bad considering what I'm saying about how the main gimmick of the game is used, but I can't say I don't enjoy playing this game, and that's solely because of 2 moves. The homing attack is back, but this time it doesn't damage enemies, but it does get you in a position to do the combo swing. Jumping, homing attacking, and air slashing is really freaking satisfying to do in Black Knight. Whenever I see a crowd of enemies, I get really hyped because it gives me another chance to slash through them all in seconds. Check out this clip of me and the Great Megalith. That was really satisfying. That was one of many clips from that mission I recorded. It's a short mission, but I played it over and over for 10 minutes straight because I really loved that spinning slash. It also goes to show how Twitter makes for a really interesting inkblot test. Like, I dumped one clip of this on Twitter with no context or description telling you I think it's based AF gameplay, and so, like my previous tweet about Unleashed, people interpreted it however they wanted to. Besides that, Sonic can also use the returning Soul Gauge. No time break in this one, and while speed break is still in the game, the Soul Gauge is mainly used for the precision slashes from the ground in the air. This is simple enough, press B to lock on and shake the remote to attack. However, you'll see the icon flash white briefly, and this moment allows you to do the perfect slash where you get a different sound effect and the gauge is frozen rather than decreasing like it would with the regular slash. Is it really so simple that I enjoy playing Black Knight because I think spinning through enemies and getting perfect slashes is fun? When all the rest of the sword mechanics are okay at best and a major pace breaker at worst? Yeah, pretty much. Hey, I'm not pretending to be an analytical think piece guy anymore. I think Black Knight is fun for the reasons I just listed, and nothing really can change that. Helps that I enjoy the structure of this game too. Every area has mandatory missions like reaching the goal or killing this many enemies, donating to this many townspeople, and that sort of thing. There are also multiple optional missions which include the tasks I've already mentioned, or the legacy missions where you collect rings, run on dash pads and fight Eggman mechs like a traditional game as opposed to the fairies you collect, blue dash things you run on, and the demons you face off against in the main game. Some stages also have longer variants of the main stage like Deep Woods and Camelot Castle and a bunch of other stuff. My point is, Secret Rings also had mandatory and optional missions, but that game padded out its runtime by making it unclear what missions were mandatory and which were optional. Black Knight just has two different icons, mandatory missions and optional ones. Black Knight also tells you what stages have new mission unlocks, when Secret Rings would just be like, hey, new missions opened. I hope it's already clear why I'm saying that this game, to me, is connected to Secret Rings like any sequel would be, but I don't think it's an all-or-nothing package. This is everything a sequel should be as far as how it plays and what it does with the idea of Sonic in a fantasy setting. My overall point being that I can say Secret Rings sucks while also saying that Black Knight is really fun because it improves the formula in a lot of ways. What I'm countering is the idea that if you hate one of these, you hate both of them, and vice versa. Which was the common wisdom in my comments on Secret Rings, like I said. Where both titles kind of lack is in the boss department. Secret Rings took the auto-run mechanic and made that the basis for most of its encounters. Black Knight has you face off against the Knights of the Round Table, and like some DMC encounter, this is not. Especially Lancelot, who goes down in like 10 seconds if you know what you're doing. Since the jump slash and the perfect strike get blocked by these characters, it just becomes rounds of motion mashing my way to victory and calling it a day. Although I was pretty proud of one thing, on this playthrough I actually got these clash moments right. I've never been able to execute that well before. But hey, when all three of them get defeated, Sonic finally has the power he needs to face off against King Arthur, who's the other major boss of the game. This scene with Sonic standing up to this guy with the main theme instrumental in the background has always been one of my favorites.
I'm Sonic the Hedgehog, Knight of the Wind. Let's settle this once and for all, King Arthur.
It seems your impersonation of a knight has improved somewhat.
I have you to thank for that.
Then let us have another look at that unsightly swordsmanship.
You're gonna be sorry you asked.
But before I can even think about it, there's this boss fight where you chase the king and attack with the soul gauge and... Wait, that's it?
Too easy. Piece of cake.
Well, let's see the ending.
Yes! I did it!
Well, I guess that's it. Yeah, if you played the game, you know what's going on here. Black Knight has a fake ending like Secret Rings did, but honestly, Secret Rings did it better. In that game, you fight the Eraser Djinn after a long campaign, and then get an ending that clearly shows you need to collect the world rings to progress onto the final boss and ending of the story. Here, you beat King Arthur and the game ends. This being the worst showing of this effect in the series, because when I was a kid, I seriously thought the game was over. Because you're booted back to the title screen when the credits stop rolling. Was my young self the idiot here? Like, I saw the credits, I went back to the title screen, and stopped playing the game for a week because I thought it was over. This probably being the Sonic game I beat the fastest as a kid, which starts another conversation that'll be important for the coming games. Sonic and the Black Knight is too short, arguably. I think Black Knight is fun, but ultimately the game's campaign doesn't feel particularly meaty. Maybe there's a direct correlation between the amount of padding in a 3D Sonic game and how long the game feels to play, because I don't think Black Knight has much in the way of padding, and look, it's the shortest 3D game in the series thus far. A run of Black Knight can be done in under 2 hours, 3 if you're watching all the cutscenes. But luckily, I no longer have an arbitrarily placed timestamp on how long a game must be in order to impress me with some stupid shit like that. But as it stands, I just don't like Black Knight having a fake ending and fake credits, because the entire last hour of the game is after that. But I suppose that begs discussion of the story. Amongst the adventure, Dark Age fans, whatever you want to call them, Black Knight is commonly regarded as the last of the good stories in Sonic games. And now, how do I feel about this? Well, I think this one's pretty damn strong. First, the cast of characters from the Arthurian legend are portrayed by Sonic characters, like in Secret Rings. Tails takes the role of the blacksmith, Amy as the Lady of the Lake, Sir Lancelot is Shadow, Gawain as Knuckles, and Percival as Blaze. Weirdly, they also have in the gallery Silver the Hedgehog as Sir Galahad and Jet the Hawk as Sir Lamorak. This just makes me wonder if Black Knight had an issue with content being left in the cutting room floor, as these two play no role in the story at all. In the lore, Galahad was the illegitimate son of Lancelot, so hey, get speculating everybody. But as for the story itself, I think it actually has a lot of decent surprises in store for fans of the series, especially if you already played Secret Rings. Like how Merlina summons Sonic to this world. She follows Sonic to the first level until you find Caliburn, who can actually talk. You'd probably expect Merlina to be the Shara of this game, but she actually hangs back and the adventure is just with Sonic and Caliburn. Another difference between the two stories is that fighting the Eraser Djinn would be an unquestionable good, because you'd be saving the Arabian Knights from destruction, but in this game, Sonic has to face off against King Arthur. Evil or not, he's still the king. But this doesn't bother Sonic because hey, he doesn't mind playing the bad guy every now and again if it means doing what he thinks is right. This game is easily one of my favorite portrayals of Sonic as a character, like I said at the beginning. You could criticize the fact that Sonic just falls into this world face first and becomes a better knight than the Knights of the Round Table in like 2 hours and just starts lecturing them on how it ought to be. But I'm fine with that. Especially because the Knights of the Round Table sticking so strongly to their beliefs and free-spirited Sonic being in opposition to that makes sense and ties into one of the main themes of the game. Which I guess brings me to that issue.
Only death can remove this stain upon my honor.
Give me a break! What's up with all this drama?
I feel like my review of Sonic 06 covered this pretty well, but I really don't mind this being in a Sonic game. Maybe the children's media that 2000s kids consumed has me completely desensitized to things that would be considered inappropriate for kids to see only 10 years earlier, but because of said exposure, I don't mind. Sonic and the Black Knight is a story about living life to the fullest, regardless of whatever expectations there are about what you should do based on a title or whatever shit you have holding you back. Since it's a kid's game, it's pretty heavy-handed honestly, but I like it though. I think it's perfectly in place for all the reasons I said in the 06 video. Kids media is a perfect place for moral lessons. Maybe Gawain trying to kill himself for losing is a goofy image, but I think it's well done. The story feels like a complete journey, even if it's not that long. Sonic proves himself as a worthy knight, if only just by being himself, and that's what I like about his character. He's cool, but also straightforward. By the end, getting the respect of Caliburn and defeating King Arthur. Leading us into the final act of the game. It actually turns out that Merlina was also a villain in this story, as she takes the scabbard of King Arthur and uses it to transform the kingdom as she sees fit. The game then gives us this escape scene with Sonic and the Knights. Just figured I'd show that. It was cool. I watched it like 100 times back in the day. To stop the spread of Merlina's power, Sonic and Co. must activate 4 barriers around the land, which means Shadow's playable. Okay, it's Lancelot, but it's playable Shadow. I mean, Lancelot's got chaos powers and the Shadow sound effects, it's close enough. But it's not just Shadow, you also get to play as Knuckles and Blaze as well. Unfortunately, the hype of playing as Shadow doesn't last long. It's novel to be able to play as the Knights in these red stages, but none of them are as good as Sonic. Shadow just has more delay between his Soul Gauge strikes than Sonic and has a harder time executing the Spin Slash. Knuckles throws his weapon at targets when using the Soul Gauge and doesn't have a Spin Slash. And Blaze, she's just terrible in this game. Worst ground combat, my least favorite character to platform as, uses a spinning fire technique instead of the slash mechanic from the Soul Gauge, and thus sticks out like a sore thumb. So thankfully you can just play as Sonic in these new stages: Knight's Passage, Shrouded Forest, Great Megalith, the Cauldron, and Dragon's Lair. Yeah, you battle a freaking dragon in this game too. I like to do this one last because the second level sees you fighting a dragon as a tutorial, and it seems fitting to face a bigger one on the second to last stage. Now, there is a reason to keep playing as Sonic at this point, because once Faraway Avalon is unlocked, you can get access to Sonic's different styles. The whole time the player was using the default all-around mode, Knight style. And now there are 2 new ones: Paladin style, my favorite, which increases the player's attack power, and Cavalier style, which increases the player's movement speed. Now you have to increase the proficiency of these 2 styles by getting good ranks using the same system I mentioned at the beginning. Paladin style even giving Sonic the ability to slash while on the ground and not losing his speed, a great unlockable, even if the animation looks terrible. The other Knights also have unlockable weapons with different stats to use that you make by combining the elements you get from completed stages. This game really does encourage replayability, kind of making up for the short campaign. These 5 stages have a lot of urgency to them when playing them, because you only have so much time before the kingdom is completely corrupted, and we're also getting closer to the climax of the story, and the music really sells that. In fact, the soundtrack of this game kicks ass. In hindsight, this game kind of feels like a send-off to the Jun Senoue Crush 40 era of Sonic, because several composers came together for this soundtrack to produce a really high-energy collection of tracks that are total bangers. But even better than that are these vocal tracks. Crush 40 doing 4 vocals for one game, maybe to make up for them taking a back seat in the last couple of games. Night of the Wind, the main theme, being really popular with a lot of fans, although my heart goes to the fantastic, albeit short, boss themes, Fight the Night and Through the Fire especially.
In my path, you feed me either way. So the truth will set you free.
Seriously, in the past, I've kind of slept on this soundtrack, but now it's definitely one of my favorites. It doubles down on that adventure-era guitar style, and I'm far more than here for it. That idea of sending off the adventure era coming through and how this game uses It Doesn't Matter, Unknown from ME, and Throw It All Away at just the right moments to show that the series' history was not lost on anyone who made this game. A game released when the series was 18 years old already. Come to think of it, I think the music is a contributor to why I enjoy the game so much. Like, thinking back on this game, the 2 moves I enjoy using and the soundtrack just allow me to easily recall this as being a really fun game, regardless of how the review turns out, you know? The set pieces also help with this. Not as flashy as Secret Rings, but still having the good camera angles and noteworthy moments throughout that just make the journey a really fucking based AF one. With all that said and done, we're at the end of the game, with some really good cutscenes. But I mentioned a scene that I watched over and over earlier, this next one being the pinnacle of that. With the power of all the sacred swords from the knights combined, Sonic is transformed into Excalibur Sonic and the final fight begins. Now, this final boss is pretty simple and easy, although I struggled a lot with it back in the day, but still. Winning is as simple as this. Just spam the dodge button until the prompt comes on the screen, shake the remote, and repeat until the bar is full and unleash your soul gauge. Timing your attacks with the perfect strike I mentioned earlier will allow you to attack for a longer duration and repeat that until the day is saved. Simple, but what have I been saying all retrospective? Just like cool moments in my games. In this final battle, we get to listen to the vocal theme with me as we finish the game, and I've always thought this was a great theme that had a different energy to it from other Sonic tracks. Maybe it's the guitars, or the female vocals. Only a couple tracks in the series have had that before, but never as like a final boss theme.
My eyes are filled with curiosity. You think that you have power over me. In this life, there's no room for you and me.
Every world will have its taste. Don't wait.
There is nothing Excalibur can't cover.
But
Whew! Just made it!
Once the battle's over, you get what's now an iconic scene in this series.
Merlina, every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have. At least, that's what I figure.
That is the whole message of the game summed up. Hey kids, things change, that might be kinda sad, but you can still live life to the fullest in the time we have. I love it. That being the final cutscene that Jason Griffith voiced Sonic in, and I must say, what a way to go out. Doing a fantastic job as Sonic in Unleashed and Black Knight. Interestingly, the portrayal of Sonic in these two games are very different. In Unleashed, Sonic was a lot more reserved, but in this game he's just like he was in the adventure games, and Jason could pull off both of them really well. Best Sonic voice of all time. But I did say this was the last game. After this, the contract between Sega and 4Kids had expired, and with that, they decided to start fresh with the voice cast in 2010. With that, I'd say Sonic and the Black Knight is in many ways the end of an era. You know, people have objected to me calling the mid to late 2000s of Sonic the Dark Age, and would probably rather the 2010s get that name, but it's not without reason that I call this time period that. It's not malice towards these games. Hell no. The Dark Age of Sonic contains many of my favorite childhood games that I recall having spent countless hours playing and adoring. It's certainly not because I hate them. It's just that the brand was suffering at the time, and I think Black Knight was an exclamation mark upon that sentence. I've gone over this time and time again. Sonic 06 damaged this brand really bad. You could say we're still paying for it now, 15 years later, but at the time it was even worse. Screw Attack naming Sonic and the Black Knight the worst Wii game of 2009, even with all the shovelware on that console, because of course, it's Sonic and a sword. Everyone knows about the infamous IGN Sonic Unleashed review as well. My point in rehashing old stuff like that is because I think this era is just when Sonic looked the worst. And to be fair, at the end of Black Knight, Sonic is literally crowned King Arthur for saving the day. In the course of 5 years, Shadow had a gun and found out he was the spawn of alien invaders. Sonic got killed and brought back to life via a kiss from a human princess. He went to the Arabian Nights and said the words,
It might even open the gates of hell!
He turned into a werehog and got crowned King Arthur. I don't know, I just feel like it'd be easy to think that Sonic had totally jumped the shark back in the day. Especially with all that stuff happening back to back. But that's not my experience with this era, and it doesn't have to be yours either. That's been a theme in the Sonic community for the last couple of years. Sonic fans who grew up in the 2000s are able to share their perspective online, while the narrative on the internet when the Dark Age games were new was just about how bad they were. For me, I played all these games, and what did I see? Sonic the Hedgehog, being a hero, helping people when they need it most, shaking them out of apathy, inspiring those who might have lost hope, never giving up no matter what. Not for anybody else, but because he thought it was the right thing to do. Something about his character I thought was great from Sonic 1 all the way to this point. Regardless of what the comments might say, I don't speak for anybody but myself. This is just how I've experienced the series. But on that note, one of my favorite things about Black Knight is how in the options menu you can find artwork from all over the world that was sent in during a fan art contest that Sega held. I haven't watched this fan art compilation in over 10 years, but it was really validating for me to watch it again for this video. Fans decided to draw some of their favorite moments in the series, things I've been talking about as standout moments that set Sonic apart from other mascots of his day since the Sonic 1 review. Moments like the final boss of Sonic 1, like 5 people drew what happened at Hidden Palace Zone in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, a couple of people did the Metal Sonic race of Sonic CD, Super Sonic vs. Perfect Chaos in Sonic Adventure 1, several iconic moments from Sonic Adventure 2 are the final boss of Heroes, Team Dark, the silver boss of 06, the final boss of Secret Rings, or drawing Savannah Citadel from Unleashed, and a bunch of stuff from various spin-offs the series had released over the years. With a bunch of different styles too, like this Hidden Palace one with the modern characters, and a modern art style version of classic Eggman up there. Clearly thousands of people all over the world saw the same thing in Sonic that I did, and it shows in this art gallery, complemented by this remix of It Doesn't Matter, Sonic's theme from Sonic Adventure 1. And really, I don't know what else there is to say for this video. Sonic and the Black Knight isn't an amazing game, simply because of the fact that most of its core gimmick isn't that great. But the things that I do love about Black Knight are things that I really do. I can't help but give it an A grade just for that. Now, you might be thinking that the Dark Age era of videos is over, but that would be premature. I have lots of stuff I still need to talk about from this era, literally like I did for the previous ones. Come on people, have some more faith in me. We gotta do Sonic Rush Adventure, Sonic Colors in the DS, Sonic Rivals 2, Sonic Riders, Sonic Riders Zero Gravity, and of course the infamous Sonic Free Riders. I hope everybody's excited for all that because I know I'm looking forward to playing all these spin-offs again because it's been a long time. With that said, that ends the Black Knight video, and I thank everyone for watching, and I will see you next time.